Some people can turn making dinner into a hazmat situation. These aren't just burnt toast or overcooked pasta. We're talking about culinary catastrophes that required emergency services, building evacuations, and sometimes hazmat teams. These are cooking disasters that started with "how hard could it be?" and ended with fire departments questioning their career choices. Here are 33 cooking disasters that nearly burned down kitchens and made emergency responders add new response categories just for kitchen stupidity. 1. A college student decided to deep fry a turkey in his dorm room using a camping stove and a metal trash can filled with vegetable oil. He placed the frozen turkey directly into the scalding oil without thawing it first, creating an explosive reaction that shot boiling oil across his entire room, set his curtains on fire, and triggered a building-wide evacuation. The fire department had to use specialized foam to contain the grease fire that had spread to 3 other rooms. 2. A woman thought she could speed up her slow cooker by putting it inside her oven and turning the heat to maximum. The plastic slow cooker melted completely, dripping toxic plastic throughout her oven and filling her house with poisonous fumes. The oven had to be professionally cleaned by hazmat specialists, and she spent the night in the hospital being treated for chemical inhalation. 3. A man decided to cook bacon in his microwave but forgot to put it on a plate. The bacon grease accumulated in the bottom of the microwave, caught fire, and created what firefighters described as a contained grease bomb. The microwave door blew open, spraying burning fat across his kitchen counter and igniting a dish towel that spread the fire to his wooden cabinets before he could react. 4. A teenager trying to make homemade French fries filled a large pot with oil and turned the burner to high heat, then left the kitchen to play video games. When he returned an hour later, the oil had reached over 500 degrees and spontaneously combusted, creating a column of flame that reached his ceiling and melted his smoke detector. The fire department arrived to find him trying to put out the grease fire with water, which only made the flames spread faster. 5. A home chef decided to flambe a dessert, but used rubbing alcohol instead of cooking wine because alcohol is alcohol. The resulting fireball was so intense it singed off his eyebrows, melted his kitchen light fixture, and left scorch marks on his ceiling. He spent 3 days explaining to his insurance adjuster why his kitchen looked like it had been hit by a small explosion. 6. A woman attempted to cook a whole chicken in her toaster oven by stuffing it inside and turning the temperature to maximum. The chicken was too large for the appliance, pressing against the heating elements and catching fire within minutes. The burning chicken created so much smoke that her fire alarm system triggered an automatic call to emergency services, who arrived to find her frantically trying to extract a flaming bird from her smoking toaster oven. 7. A college student living in an apartment without a proper stove decided to cook spaghetti using his clothes iron and a metal mixing bowl. He filled the bowl with water, placed it on his ironing board, and tried to use the iron as a heating element. The water boiled over, short-circuited the iron, caused electrical sparks, and started a small fire on his ironing board that quickly spread to his laundry hanging nearby. 8. A man thought he could dry wet firewood faster by putting logs in his oven at low temperature. The wood had been treated with chemical preservatives that released toxic gases when heated, filling his house with poisonous fumes and causing the wood to spontaneously ignite. The fire department had to evacuate his entire neighborhood block while they ventilated the area and extinguished the chemical fire burning inside his oven. 9. A woman decided to cook corn on the cob in her dishwasher by sealing it in mason jars and running a hot cycle. The pressure from the heating water caused several jars to explode, shooting glass shrapnel and hot corn throughout her dishwasher and kitchen. The explosion was so violent it cracked her dishwasher door and sent corn kernels embedded in the ceiling where they remained for months. 10. A teenager attempted to make molecular gastronomy by mixing household chemicals with food ingredients, creating what he thought would be a smoking dessert effect. The chemical reaction produced toxic chlorine gas that filled his kitchen with poisonous green smoke. His entire family had to be evacuated and treated by paramedics, and hazmat teams spent hours decontaminating his kitchen. 11. A man tried to speed up his barbecue cooking by bringing his charcoal grill inside during a rainstorm. He set it up in his kitchen and lit the coals, not realizing that burning charcoal produces deadly carbon monoxide in enclosed spaces. His smoke detector went off within minutes, but not before carbon monoxide levels had reached dangerous concentrations. Emergency responders found him unconscious in his kitchen, surrounded by glowing coals. 12. A woman decided to make homemade potato chips by slicing potatoes with a power saw she'd cleaned really well after using it for home renovation. Metal shavings from the saw blade contaminated the potatoes, and when she fried them, the metal particles created sparks that ignited the cooking oil. The resulting fire spread so quickly she had to escape through her back door and watch her kitchen burn from outside. 13. A college student living in a dorm tried to cook ramen noodles in a coffee pot, but accidentally used the hot plate setting instead of the water heating function. The plastic ramen container melted onto the hot plate, creating toxic fumes and a plastic fire that triggered the dorm's entire fire suppression system, flooding 3 floors with fire suppressant foam and causing thousands of dollars in damage. 14. A home cook decided to make candy by heating sugar in a large metal pot, but used way too much sugar and turned the heat too high. The sugar reached over 400 degrees and turned into liquid caramel that was impossible to control. When she tried to move the pot, she spilled molten sugar across her stovetop, where it continued burning and created a sweet-smelling but dangerous fire that melted her burner grates. 15. A man thought he could cook a roast faster by wrapping it in aluminum foil and putting it directly on his oven's heating elements. The foil conducted heat so efficiently it reached over 800 degrees, welding itself to the heating elements and creating electrical shorts that started small fires throughout his oven. The repair bill exceeded the cost of a new oven, and his kitchen was without power for a week. 16. A woman decided to sterilize her cutting board by pouring boiling water over it while it sat on her gas stovetop. She didn't realize the cutting board was made of bamboo with a plastic coating that melted when exposed to extreme heat. The melted plastic dripped onto her burner, caught fire, and created toxic fumes that required professional kitchen cleaning and new ventilation systems. 17. A teenager tried to make homemade pizza but put it directly on his oven rack without a pan. The cheese and toppings dripped through the rack onto the oven's bottom heating element, creating multiple small fires that filled his kitchen with smoke. When he opened the oven door to check on the pizza, the sudden influx of oxygen caused the grease fires to flare up and singe his hair. 18. A man attempted to cook eggs by placing them directly in his toaster, thinking the heat would cook them evenly. The eggs exploded within minutes, coating the inside of his toaster with hot egg mixture that short-circuited the heating elements. The electrical malfunction created sparks that ignited the egg residue, turning his toaster into a small incendiary device that he had to throw outside before it set his counter on fire. 19. A woman tried to defrost a frozen turkey by putting it in her oven at the lowest temperature and leaving it overnight. The turkey was still partially frozen when she increased the temperature in the morning, causing uneven cooking that created steam pressure inside the bird. The turkey essentially exploded in her oven, coating the interior with hot poultry bits and grease that caught fire when exposed to the heating elements. 20. A college student decided to make popcorn by heating kernels in a metal pot with no oil, not understanding that popcorn needs fat to pop properly. The kernels burned against the metal bottom, creating acrid smoke, and when he tried to add oil to fix the problem, a combination of hot metal and cold oil created violent spattering that started small grease fires on his stovetop and counter. 21. A man thought he could cook bacon faster by laying strips directly on his oven racks without a pan underneath. The bacon grease dripped down onto the oven's heating elements and bottom surface, creating multiple grease fires that turned his oven into what firefighters described as a bacon-fueled inferno. The grease fire was so intense it cracked his oven door and required specialized fire suppressant to extinguish. 22. A woman attempted to make homemade bread, but misread the recipe and used baking soda instead of baking powder in a ratio that was 10 times too high. The excessive leavening agent created a chemical reaction that caused the bread to expand violently in her oven, pushing against the heating elements and catching fire. The burning bread created so much smoke, her neighbors called the fire department thinking her house was on fire. 23. A teenager tried to cook instant mac and cheese in his microwave but forgot to add water to the bowl. The dried pasta and cheese powder overheated and spontaneously combusted, creating a small fireball inside the microwave. When he opened the door to check on it, the sudden oxygen exposure caused the fire to flare out of the microwave, singeing his face and igniting a nearby paper towel roll. 24. A man decided to speed up his grilling by using gasoline as a fire starter on his charcoal. The gasoline created an explosive ignition that shot flames several feet into the air, melting the plastic handle of his grill and igniting nearby patio furniture. The fire spread so quickly he had to use his garden hose to prevent it from reaching his house's vinyl siding. 25. A woman tried to cook fish by wrapping it in newspaper and baking it, not realizing that newspaper ink contains chemicals that become toxic when heated. The newspaper caught fire in her oven, creating poisonous smoke that filled her house and required hazmat cleanup. The fish was completely inedible, and her kitchen needed professional decontamination before it was safe to use again. 26. A college student attempted to make a volcano cake using baking soda and vinegar, but added so much of each ingredient that the chemical reaction was far more violent than expected. The mixture overflowed his mixing bowl, spread across his electric stovetop, and created chemical burns on his burner surfaces. When he tried to clean it up immediately, the residual reaction created more heat and small fires on his cooktop. 27. A man thought he could cook a whole chicken faster by cutting it into pieces with a chainsaw he'd cleaned thoroughly after yard work. Microscopic wood chips and bar oil contaminated the chicken, and when he tried to fry the pieces, the foreign materials created violent spattering and small fires in his pan. The contaminated oil had to be disposed of as hazardous waste. 28. A woman decided to make candy apples by heating caramel in her microwave, but used a metal bowl because it looked more professional. The metal caused electrical arcing inside the microwave, creating sparks that ignited the caramel. The burning sugar created toxic fumes and melted the microwave's interior plastic, requiring professional appliance disposal and kitchen ventilation cleaning. 29. A teenager tried to cook hot dogs by attaching them to metal coat hangers and holding them over his gas stovetop burner. The metal conducted heat so efficiently it burned his hands, causing him to drop the improvised cooking apparatus into the burner flame. The coat hanger melted onto his burner grate, creating toxic fumes from the plastic coating and requiring professional stovetop replacement. 30. A man attempted to make homemade beef jerky by hanging meat strips inside his oven and leaving the door slightly open for air circulation. The combination of low heat and airflow created perfect conditions for bacterial growth, and when he increased the temperature to finish the jerky, the contaminated meat created toxic fumes that filled his house. The health department had to be called to assess food safety hazards. 31. A woman tried to cook vegetables by placing them directly on her outdoor grill grates, but the vegetables fell through into the coals below. When she tried to retrieve them with metal tongs, she accidentally scattered burning coals across her wooden deck. The embers ignited the deck planking, creating a fire that damaged her patio furniture and required fire department intervention to prevent spread to her house. 32. A college student decided to make flaming shots for a party by lighting alcohol on fire in shot glasses, but used grain alcohol that burned much hotter than expected. The flames were invisible in daylight, and when he tried to blow them out, the alcohol vapor ignited and created a flash fire that singed his eyebrows and ignited nearby plastic cups. The fire spread across his counter before he could react properly. 33. And finally, the most spectacularly dangerous cooking disaster of all time. A man decided to deep fry a turkey in his garage during winter, using a propane burner and a pot that was far too small for the job. He lowered the frozen turkey into the overflowing oil, which immediately spilled onto the propane flame and created a massive grease fire. The fire spread to stored gasoline cans, paint cans, and cardboard boxes, creating a garage inferno so intense it melted his garage door and threatened his house. The fire department had to call in additional units to contain what they described as a turkey-initiated hazmat situation. The question that haunts every professional firefighter is this: which one of these cooking disasters made you immediately want to inspect your own fire extinguisher? Drop a comment and tell us which cook you think deserves to have their kitchen privileges permanently revoked based purely